Hey, Aaron Rabinowitz here for Red Giant TV. At the beginning of this year, we introduced you to writer-director Seth Worley in a very popular tutorial called Recreating the Lost Smoke Monster. We were so impressed with Seth's work, we hired him to direct and co-write a short film called Plot Device to help us launch our Magic Bullet Suite 11. Now, we took you behind the scenes of that film in episode 57 of Red Giant TV. But due to popular demand, we asked Seth to come back and do a series of tutorials to walk you through some of the film's visual effects in detail. So, in this tutorial, we'll cover the sci-fi explosion effect, where a dome of energy flies out of the button and hits the camera, in a tutorial Seth calls Thunderdome.
Alright, so now I'm going to show you how we did one of the more ridiculous effect shots from Plot Device, which I like to call Thunderdome. This is the original plate we shot from behind Ben on sticks, locked down. It's on sticks, but it's also moving down and shaking a little bit. So we're going to have to motion track it if we're going to add stuff to it. So we're going to open up our tracker. We're going to make sure our footage is selected, and we're going to select Track Motion. And then we're going to take the tracker and move it and try to find a specific point. And we're actually going to put it right around the place where the button is, which actually turns out where Ben's foot is. So we'll have it track the corner of Ben's foot, move our tracking area right there, and then our area that the tracker will be aware of. And then we're going to watch it motion track. So now that's done, we've regained consciousness, and we will now, we're going to apply our track to a null object. So we're going to create a new null object and select Edit Target. We're going to select Null 1, and we're going to apply. So now, and then we'll hit OK, and so that null object is now tracked to the corner of Ben's foot. We're going to rename that null to Tracking Null, so we don't get confused. Now we're going to create a solid, and we're going to call it Form, and we're going to drop trapcode Form onto that solid. So then we're going to go into the animation presets, and we're going to select String Ball Loop 3 SHD, which is what people call me in high school. We're going to open up the spherical field, and we're going to open Sphere 1, and we're going to increase the strength all the way up to 100%, and that's going to give us our little bubble here. When we increase the radius, you can see that it explodes somewhat like a bubble there now. So we're going to set that at about like 257, we're going to say, is a good lucky number. So we're going to actually start keyframing. We're going to go right to where our bubble will have expanded, and that's where we're going to start our keyframes. So we're going to keyframe the size X, Y, and Z, and our spherical field, we're going to keyframe the radius. And then we're going to move back to the beginning of the timeline. We're going to make the radius of the spherical field 0 and make all of our size dimensions 0 in the X, Y, and Z. So what that will do now is now the first couple frames of our timeline will involve the form bursting. So that's cool. So now we obviously want to continue that burst. We want to go to the middle of the timeline, increase our radius, maybe at 500, and then go all the way to the end and increase our timeline to 1150. And one thing we'll notice is that when the bubble gets, as it gets bigger, we lose sight of it. It gets too thin. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the size of the particles as the bubble explodes. We're going to make it go up in size, ending at about 5. So see there, now it stays visible as it explodes. So step 3 is to make it a dome. So we're going to start by pre-composing our form layer. We're going to select our form layer, Command-Shift-C makes it pre-compose, and we're going to select Move All Attributes into the new composition. And so now we have form is in our own pre-composed composition. So the standalone thing, we're going to now we can adjust its position and move the sphere to where it's going to be bursting right from where the button is. And now once we do that, we're going to parent it to the tracking null. So now it is tracked with the motion of our camera move, and it is bursting from the button location. So once we do that, we want to mess around with the scale a little bit. We're going to unlink the X and Y. We're going to widen it horizontally. So once we do that, we're going to actually keyframe the scale, move to the end of the timeline, go ahead and relock our X and Y, and then increase it so it gets bigger and bigger as size goes on. So there, that looks pretty good. So now we're going to select our pen tool, and then we're going to create a mask. And we're going to essentially cut this sphere in half to make it a dome. All right, so once that's done, we're going to go down here to our mask, and we're actually going to keyframe the mask expansion. As you can see, as we adjust this, it can simulate as if, simulate the distance that the dome is spreading. We're going to keyframe the expansion, go through the timeline and set our keyframes, and increase the expansion of the dome to make it appear as if it is spreading across the pavement. And then we're going to add effects to it now. So let's go in and we're going to add hue saturation, and we're going to move our saturation down to like about -75-ish. And so now it's more of a grayish, bluish gray, and we're going to go to CC vector blur, and this is going to create kind of our swirly energiness about it. And we're going to increase the amount to about 30 and the ridge smoothness to like 4-ish. So now it looks all electrical and crazy, and now by adding the CC vector blur, it thins out our dome even more. So we're going to go down here, we're going to mess around with the particle size. We can move our keyframes a little bit to make it, increase the size quicker. Particle size, increasing that is the quickest way to, add more visibility to it as we add, blurs and stuff to it. Now we're going to add a glow. And adding a glow, we're going to increase our radius. And then we want to add fast blur, and with that we're going to simulate the depth of field with the blur. So as it gets closer to camera, we will increase a fast blur on it. So we're going to go to the middle, keyframe our blurriness. In the middle we'll keyframe it at 0, and then we'll move our timeline toward the end, and we will increase the blurriness for fast blur. And then for really no good reason, click repeat edge pixels, just because, for really superstitious reasons more than anything. Any good sci-fi sequence needs some flare. So we're going to create an adjustment layer. We're going to rename it to flare, and we're going to apply null light factory to that adjustment layer. Now we're going to click options, and we're going to go down to load. Then we're going to go into the Guru preset pack by our friend Harry Frank. We're going to select Panamorphic. Click OK, and that is a pretty sweet flare. We're going to go down here in our timeline, and we're going to expand in our adjustment layer and our effects and our light factory so we can see our light source location, and then we're going to do our tracking null, and so we can see the position. And now we're going to alt-click on light source location, and we're going to parent it to the position of the tracking null. So now that flare is going to stick to that tracking null. And now it looks like it is integrated into the shot, and it's coming from the button. So now we'll keyframe our brightness and our scale to make it look as if it flashes at the very beginning and then gets brighter over the course of the timeline, and maybe add some random flashes and stuff at the end. Really to your taste, it's whatever you want to do. So just adjusting the brightness and the scale and keyframing throughout the timeline, and just working nonstop until it doesn't look really bad. Yeah, it might take a little while. It's just however meticulous you want to get. So that looks pretty cool. Now that we've done that, we want to add a little bit more craziness. So we're going to add an adjustment layer, and we're going to call it turbulent displace, and we're going to apply a turbulent displace to that adjustment layer. And this is going to simulate as the dome gets closer and closer to the camera, our image gets more and more wobbly because we're seeing it through the surface of the dome. So what we want to do is we want to go to the middle of the timeline, and we want to keyframe our amount and our size and our offset. And we want to go to the end of the timeline now. We want to increase our amount and decrease the size so that it gets more and more complex looking as it gets closer. And then our offset turbulence, we want to, at the end of the timeline, we want to move the offset up on the y-plane. So then it's basically, so it's moving vertically as it moves, and that will add a wobbly motion to the image. So now that's done, we're going to add our shake. So we're going to grab our comp that we're working with, drop it into a brand new composition, and we're going to apply CC Reptile, and we're going to select Unfold, and we're just going to, increase it by an arbitrary amount on the right, left, and the down and the up. And again, just like the last tutorial, this exists so that we can apply a shake, and as we move off the edges of the frame, we don't just see black. We end up seeing more simulated image. So now we're going to apply a wiggle position, and we're going to keyframe that so it doesn't have just a steady, regular shake throughout. We want it to look like we want it to simulate that the dome effect that's happening, the burst is actually, knocking the cameraman to and fro. So that looks good, and we'll drop wiggle rotation on and do the exact same thing. Keyframe that to our heart's content. It's suitable to your own taste. And then we're going to add Mojo, and we're going to drop the effect on top of everything so that we don't miss anything. We're going to apply an adjustment layer, Mojo, and drop Mojo onto it. Yeah, for our sci-fi sequences in plot device, we increased the tent and decreased the balance a bit, and then we actually increased the overall Mojo amount throughout, so it was like super stylized. Then you want to make sure you check motion blur on all of your comps and all of your layers. Make sure motion blur is selected, because motion blur is our friend. And then we render it. So there you have it. Hope you guys had fun in the Thunderdome.
Thanks, Seth. That was explosive and thundertastic. If you enjoyed this tutorial and you want to learn more about Seth and his work, check out his site at sethworley.com. There's great stuff there, including his web series, Adventure Now, and The Time Closet. Don't forget, you can always download a free trial of any of the Red Giant products that Seth used in this video at redgiantsoftware.com. And you can get tons of free presets for Red Giant plugins on redgiantpeople.com. In fact, Seth has been putting up a bunch of presets that he's created through his work as a director and as a visual effects and motion graphics artist. Speaking of free, check out Colorista Free and LUT Buddy, 2 free color correction plugins that we're giving away for free. Yeah, free. You can find those at redgiantsoftware.com. Finally, I want to mention that if you're looking to keep up with what we're doing at Red Giant, whether it's a tutorial, a contest, a product release, or whatever, just follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or on our blog. Once again, I'm Marlon Rabinowitz for RedGiantTV.com. See you next time.